Joyce's parents passed away and she moves in with her three sisters. In 1982, Joyce's mental health and job performance declined and she gets arrested in Newark NJ for assault. In 1985, she was dismissed from her job at the Human Rights Commission in Elizabeth, where she had been a secretary for 10 years. Her sisters took her to East Orange General Hospital for a psychiatric evaluation, where she was diagnosed as a psychotic. She was treated with antipsychotic medications and was put in restraints after attempting assaults on staff. In May 1986, after an argument, she left her sister's home and apparently became homeless. She lived outside an ice cream shop on the 2nd Avenue and 65th Street. In 1987, she was involuntarily committed to Bellevue Hospital on October 28, 1987, after a series of incidents which purportedly included running into traffic, exposing herself to passersby, making threats, tearing up and urinating on money that passersby gave her, and covering herself in her own excrement. She gave false names, including Ann Smith and Billy Boggs, later claiming in court that she gave the false names to try to hide herself from her sisters. Lawyers for the city and their psychiatric experts argued that Miss Brown had a schizophrenia, was delusional, and required hospitalization because she represented a danger to herself by virtue of self-neglect, provocative behavior, and suicidal impulses. Miss Brown's lawyers, who were members of the New York Civil Liberties Union, and their psychiatric consultants asserted that Miss Brown did not have a serious mental illness, but was a professional street person whose difficulties on the street were a natural consequence of being homeless. The two accounts of Miss Brown were as different as her own appearance under varying circumstances. On the streets, she was dirty, disheveled, malodorous, hostile, and verbally abusive. In the court, she was well-groomed, in control, logical, coherent, and even witty. Under Project HELP, this was created by Mayor Ed Koch in 1987. Its purpose was to address the issue of the healthcare needs of the homeless who resist treatment for mental illnesses. So the policy includes forcibly removing the homeless people who cause harms to themselves, and in order to be released, you must go to court. Joyce Brown was chosen as the Project HELP's first test case, and Project HELP brought Joyce to Bellevue Hospital's ER against her will. Joyce went to the American Civil Liberties Union for representation in court, and Joyce's sisters were also called as witnesses. For the final ruling, Judge Lippman, or Judge Robert D. Lippman, freed Joyce Brown. He said that she was rational, logical, and coherent despite what the psychiatrist said. For the appeal, Mayor Koch took the case to a New York State appellate court, and they overruled Judge Lippman, pointing out that he focused more on Joyce's testimony instead of the testimony. Wag mo na cut. Tuloy ko na to. Cut mo lang dito. Lippman, pointing out that he focused more on Joyce's testimony instead of the testimony of the psychiatrist. They mentioned that the whole point was to get her treated for her condition and not to get off the streets. According to the New York State, the medication could not be forced without a court order. Robert Levy, a staff attorney from the New York Civil Liberties Union, which is a state of ACLU branch, defended her in court on January 15, 1988. State Supreme Court Justice Irving Kirschenbaum ruled that New York City could not forcibly medicate Brown. Shortly, acting State Supreme Court Justice Robert Lippman ordered her release in part because although she was mentally ill, her behavior was not obviously and immediately dangerous to anyone. She was released in late January after about 11 weeks of involuntary commitment and returned to the streets. She made appearances on talk shows and spoke at universities about homelessness.
Next, we will be discussing the different bioethical principles involved in the case. First will be paternalism. Paternalism is the interference with a person's liberty of action justified by reason, referring exclusively to the welfare of the person being coerced. A paternalistic approach was taken by speaking for her and saying she had a mental illness. Joyce Brown was subjected to numerous medical examinations that aid her back to proper mental health. This may seem to benefit her, but her willingness over such treatment was coerced. Miss Brown eventually overruled her diagnosis, making the point that she was sane and that she could take care of herself. Project Help and Mayor Coach also decided that Miss Brown would be safer in Bellevue Hospital than on the streets, even though that is not what she wanted. Next is autonomy. The state or condition of self-governance or leading one's life according to reasons, values, or desires that are authentically one's own. Keeping Joyce off the streets involuntarily justified taking her right of choice. Miss Brown was also not allowed to make her own decisions about medical treatment when she was said to be mentally ill. She was forcibly taken and admitted to Bellevue Hospital, and Mayor Coach and the Bellevue Hospital took it upon themselves to admit Joyce Brown as they justified this as protecting her and others from possible harm. She was subjected to medical examinations and treatments, not knowing their purpose nor the intended results. Antipsychotic medications like Haldol and Ativan, which is a fast-acting, short-term tranquilizer, were injected against her will. She was withheld from the statement about her personal being. Third bioethical principle would be the beneficence and non-maleficence, meaning to do good and do no harm. Physicians should not provide ineffective treatments to patients as this offer risk with no possibility of benefits and have a chance of harming patients. Also, physicians must not do anything that would harm patients without a proportional benefit, like medications, procedures, and interventions sometimes pose severe threats to the patients. The hospital evaluated her as being neither sufficiently insane nor sufficiently dangerous for involuntary commitment. The medication administered can only be justified if the diagnosis is correct. In this case, there was no definite diagnosis. Four psychiatrists testified that Brown suffered from schizophrenia and should be treated in an institution, while three psychiatrists from the ACLU testified that she was not psychotic, not dangerous, not unreasonable to her answers, and not incapable of caring for herself. And after a decade, physicians noted that Joyce Brown's problem was not schizophrenia but her drug addiction. She was never a true schizophrenic, thus she never met the criteria for involuntary commitment. Applying the principle of beneficence and non-maleficence, psychiatrists must always put the patient's interest first. Joyce Brown's psychiatrists did not consider her protest about certain medical exams, which were then proven to be unnecessary because she was not mentally ill. Next would be justice, or the fairness or equality. Joyce Brown said, and quoted, "I was incarcerated against my will. I was a political prisoner. The only thing wrong with me was that I was homeless, not insane. You just can't go around picking everyone up and automatically label them schizophrenic. I'm angry at Mayor Coach, the city, and the Bellevue. They held me down and injected me. They took my blood against my will. I need a place to live. I don't need an institution. People are treated differently just because of your economic status, because of what you look like and where you live. I was mistreated, mentally abused, and I will never ever forget this." This statement justified that Joyce Brown deserves equal rights just like everyone else.
For the contribution of the case to the bioethical education, the former Billy Boggs, as she called herself, appeared on Donahue and lectured to the Harvard Law School students on the plight of the homeless. Brown eventually turned herself around, temporarily filling in as a secretary at the NYCLU and later giving a talk at Harvard titled the Homeless Crisis, A Street View in 1988. Under Project Help, which is a New York City project during the administration of Mayor Edward Koch, headed by the NYC Health and Hospitals Corporation, that aims to convince homeless people with disabilities to accept offers of food, mental health services, shelter, and transportation to an emergency room, especially those who were deemed as an imminent threat to oneself and or others. For New York State Mental Hygiene Law of 2014, this allows psychiatrists to have the authority to involuntarily transport mentally impaired homeless people to emergency rooms for evaluation and admission.
Next would be the assisted outpatient treatment. Civil legal procedure whereby a judge can order a person with mental illness who meets certain criteria to follow a court-ordered treatment plan in the community. Also, it have been shown to reduce hospitalization, arrest and incarceration, homelessness and victimization, and also to prevent violent acts associated with mental illness. Also, under Kendra's laws, provides for an assisted outpatient treatment program for a small target population of mentally ill people who are capable of living in the community with the help of family, friends, and mental health professionals, but who without routine care and treatment may relapse and become violent or suicidal or require hospitalization. The Rivers versus Katz, first the state must demonstrate by clear and convincing evidence the patient's incapacity to make a treatment decision. In the absence of such incapacity, the patient has the right to refuse treatment no matter how beneficial. Second would be if the patient is determined to lack capacity, the state must show that the proposed treatment is narrowly tailored to give substantial effect on the patient's liberty interest, taking into consideration all relevant circumstances, including the patient's best interest, benefits to be gained from the treatment, the adverse effects associated with the treatment, and any less intrusive alternative treatments. So that's all for the case about Joyce Patricia Brown. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much for the group, no? So I will share with you a video. So before I ask the 3 members of the group who reported, and then you just observe. So what's the difference? What are the common points of this case, which also was a big news in the US, no? With the case of Joyce Brown.
Body camera videos are increasingly being used in court and civil suits against law enforcement and first responders, including the case Jim Axelrod is about to show you in tonight's Eye on America. And a warning, some of what you are about to see is graphic.
It's been a year of crippling emotion for Cindy and Paul Tarashuk. A year since the death of their 26-year-old son, also named Paul.
Still not easy to talk about, is it?
No, it's talking about him gets me really upset. Talking about this stuff gets me angry.
Paul Tarashuk had schizoaffective disorder, suffering delusions and hallucinations. But he was getting on with his life until one night last September when he had a psychotic breakdown traveling along this highway near Orangeburg, South Carolina.
I stopped a few exits back.
Parked for a roadside break, a trucker suddenly saw Tarashuk walking toward him.
He comes running up in my headlights at me. Naked man. Freaks me out. I take off.
As the trucker drove down the interstate, he realized Tarashuk was riding on his rig and called 911.
Can you come on down? Come on down. What's going on? What's going on?
Officers from 3 different law enforcement agencies responded, including Orangeburg County Sheriff's Deputy Clifford Dorowski.
Oh, he's under the influence. Nobody can see that?
Who was certain Tarashuk was high or drunk.
They just want to check your vitals.
Dorowski's body camera recorded what happened when EMS arrived.
You speak English? Hey.
Tarashuk didn't answer the first responders, who were berating and cursing at him.
I'm being serious. I'm sleepy. Give me a damn name so I can go home, for real. I'm tired.
So they shoved an ammonia capsule up his nose.
Breathe that in.
He didn't flinch.
So there, I mean, at that point, someone should have stepped up and says, we got to take him in someplace. He's not just someone to let go.
Do you want to go to the hospital? Yes or no? Do you want to go to jail? Well, those are your two choices.
Then come on, I'm going to give you a ride.
As troubling as it is to watch how the ambulance crew treats Paul Tarashuk during the call, it's even more disturbing to watch the sheriff's deputy after.
You're not going to jail. You're not under arrest. I'm going to give you a ride. I'll give you a ride to a safe environment. That's all I want. I want to make sure you're all right.
The deputy puts Tarashuk into his cruiser, drives him 15 miles to this gas station near the county line, a gas station that was closed at the time. This is the last time Paul Tarashuk is seen alive. No shoes, no phone, no idea where he is.
It's just watching him walk to his death. He was escorted by an officer to his death.
I think I just hit a person on the interstate.
Nearly 5 hours later, the same EMS crew was called to deal with Tarashuk again, back on the same highway. This time, he was dead.
It's a bad week. No, he was going to try to strap him up. We just took him to the hospital, dragged him there.
A toxicology report from the Orangeburg County Coroner's Office came up clean. No drugs, no alcohol. Despite this, Deputy Clifford Dorowski is still on the job at the Orangeburg County Sheriff's Department, and so is one of the EMTs, State Senator Katrina Shealy.
Has there been, in your view,
Okay, so interesting, no? So anyway, you've all heard about the report. So Joyce Brown, may I ask the three ladies who reported, the three doctors who reported to open their camera? I cannot because my Wi-Fi is a little bit unstable. Okay, so where's the other one?
Dalawa lang po kami, Doc.
Dalawa lang ba kayo? Bakit tatlo yung...
Yes po, Doc. Yung isang device po, Doc, lang po, for power.
Okay, all right. O, sige. So, can you give me the difference which you've observed with the report that you've just presented and with this short clip? Because both are suffering from schizophrenia. Although Joyce Brown, there's a contention, there's a doubt, right? Because only 4 of the 4 doctors labeled her schizophrenic, but the other 3 didn't. No, but anyway, let's just consider her a case of schizophrenia. So, what's the difference between the 2 cases? What did you observe?
I think, Doc, dun sa kay Joyce Patricia Brown po kasi, she's not that dangerous to herself as well as to other people. So parang, pwede pa rin siyang magkaroon ng right to decide for herself despite na meron siyang mental illness. However, in the case po, yung ngayon pong pinanood natin, we can see naman po na he's dangerous.
Dangerous ba siya?
Hindi po, parang may threat po sa life niya mismo. Yung parang hindi niya po kayang i-take care yung sarili niya.
Alright. So, so you mean he's a threat to himself, not to the others?
Yes po.
Okay. So that's one thing. Another, Irish.
Doc, siguro po, regarding po sa yung kanina po, yung pinakita niyo pong video po, siguro po dapat po yung sa case po ng lalaki, dapat po pinadala po siya sa institution instead sa binitawan lang po siya sa daanan. While si Joyce Brown naman po, since hindi pa po confirmed na meron nga po siyang mental illness, pero yung Project Help po tsaka yung NYC, dinala siya po mismo doon sa mental hospital po.
Okay, so all right. So Yeah, that's also a good point. But which specific principle are you talking about, Irish? Tama yung sagot mo. Pero which principle?
Yung autonomy po, Dok.
Not quite. But actually, it's paternalism. Diba? It's the paternalistic approach. Diba? Na nawala. Na hindi natin yung nakita on the case of Paul. Right? Okay. So, for the whole class, if you've observed Joyce Brown, no? For the case of Joyce Brown, she was homeless and the paternalistic approach was practiced, right? So specifically, the mayor of New York City, right? Si Mayor Koch or Koch or whatever, no? Koch, okay? So, however, we can question a little bit the decision of Mayor Koch. Why? Because there was conflict of interest there. Bakit? Because it was his pet project, no? Yung Project Help. Okay, that's why during the first half of the report, no, you can see the involuntary involuntary what? Admission? Yon, okay. So, all right. So, ito ang importante ha. So, please take note of this, is that when we are dealing with issues, ethical issues with mentally challenged individuals, okay, so with all the principles discussed by the reporters, so take note of those. But number one, no, they are special. They are actually special population. No, why? Because okay, natapos niyo yung pedya kahit hindi tayo nag-lecture, yung video lecture or the lecture materials that I gave you. Okay, so more or less they're also like that. So kasi why? Because their decision making is deranged. Okay, so medyo of course with schizophrenia, may times kasi na sane sila, may time na meron silang psychosis. Yun yung mahirap, no? So if they're in their sane state, so no one can force them. Dapat, no? But if they are in their psychosis, nakita natin yan sa case ni Paul. Diba? So during for a long time, apparently, he was what? Controlled, no? So controlled yung kanyang schizophrenia with affection, affective disorder, no? Yun yung kanya. Controlled yung kanya. But then suddenly, nagkaroon siya ng psychosis, no? So yun yung nakita ng mga first responders and the chief police, right? Tapos they didn't recognize that this person is mentally challenged. What was their conclusion? Drugs kaagad, no? So they have a bias on drug addiction. So that's also the difference between the two cases. So see, Joyce Brown, no, was actually addicted first, diba? She's a drug addict, okay? But then that's why magkakaiba yung diagnosis nila. No? So, a group says schizophrenia, a group says no. Because of that, pwede kasi nag-overlap ang kanyang drug addictive symptoms. Okay? So, drug addiction is actually a mental issue also. Okay? So, where I am now. So, the decision making is deranged. So, yun palagi, no? Pag meron kayong mga, later on when you practice or some will decide to be psychiatrist, okay? So, definitely, mas marami in details pa yung inyong papag-aralan, no? But as a primary healthcare physician, no? So, you have to know the principles when we are dealing with mentally challenged individuals. So, they're a special population, no? So, another difference is that, no? So, Joyce Brown was considered homeless. Actually, lumayas siya, right? Okay, and Paul was not a homeless individual. So, more or less, kahit naman homeless si Joyce, may mga kamag-anak pa rin sila. So therefore, in order to prevent involuntary admission, no, involuntary confinement, okay, the mayor or the local government should have actually looked for the relatives first. Okay, kasi nga hindi naman siya dangerous at that time during the first. Nung second na kanyang exacerbation, no, after she became stable, nagle-lecture pa siya, right? She worked pa, no? Then nagka-relapse siya, no? So doon nag-verbal abuse na siya. Right? So nag-obscenity language na siya. Bumalik siya bilang homeless ulit. Okay, so yon, that was the start. Always remember that any abuse, no, starts with verbal. So pag nagkakaroon na ng verbal abuse, using verbal language abuse, no, red flag na yon. Ang susunod niyan, pag hindi yan na-control, is physical already, violence na. Okay, not just with mentally challenged individuals, but even in marriage or whatever, no? So even in relationships. So red flag na yun. Okay, so meron pa tayong love talk. Okay, so anyway, so there, no? So dapat both safe environment first, and then look for the government. Look for the relatives rather, not the government. Look for relatives, no? Because they cannot decide on themselves at that moment. Okay po? Okay, so any questions, clarifications? Kung meron kayong questions, you just type in your questions and then we can actually discuss it. Okay, so short lang yung lecture for psych issues, kaya pinagsabay yung reporting. So that's why I'm also discussing, processing the reports, and at the same time adding some salient features in dealing with ethics in mental health or in psychiatry. Okay? All right. So thank you very much, Mary Louise and Irish Gem. Okay, so thank you. Okay, so next case, please.
Good day. I'm Angelica Martinez, and together with Angeli Name, we are going to discuss about Tatiana Tarasov case report. Next slide, please. Allow me to discuss the highlights of the case. Next slide. Okay, so Tatiana Tanya Tarasov is born on January 22, 1949. She is a student at University of California, Berkeley. Prosenjit Podar is born in the Harijan caste in Bengal, India, went to University of California, Berkeley to pursue graduate studies. He resided in the International House. In the fall of 1968, Podar and Tarasov met at the International House while Tarasov was attending folk dance classes there. They started seeing each other weekly throughout the fall, and on New Year's Eve, Tarasov kissed Podar. For Podar, he interpreted it as a start of their serious relationship. But for Tarasov, she was not interested in an intimate relationship with him, and she was seeing other men. As a result, Podar experienced severe emotional crisis wherein he became depressed, neglected his studies and his health. And he spoke to a friend of being in love with Tarasov and killing her by blowing up her room. Next slide, please. On the summer of 1969, Tarasov went to Brazil. And it was also around this time that Podar began to improve. But he still sought psychological assistance at the suggestion of a friend. So he became a voluntary patient under Dr. Lawrence Moore in Cowell Memorial Hospital. Podar revealed to Dr. Moore that he was going to kill an unnamed girl when she returned from Brazil. While he didn't mention who the unnamed girl was, it was easily identifiable that he was pertaining to Tarasov. Dr. Moore notified the campus police regarding the situation as Podar may be a danger to himself and to others, and asked to bring Podar to Herrick's Hospital for emergency detention and examination. He mentioned that Podar may seem quite rational, but he suffers from paranoid schizophrenia. So Podar was taken into custody and the police interviewed him, but he was released later on as the police found out that he is rational, not a danger to himself and to others, and there was a change in his attitude, and he also agreed to stay away from Tarasov. Dr. Harvey Powelson, the director of psychiatry at Cowell Memorial Hospital, so the immediate superior of Dr. Moore, upon learning the turn of events, told Dr. Moore to retract and destroy the letter containing the detention order, including all therapist notes on Podar. Next slide, please. So what happened next? Podar went to Tarasov's home to speak with her. Unfortunately, Tarasov was not home and her mother told him to leave. Podar returned later that night carrying a pellet gun and a kitchen knife. Tarasov refused to speak with Podar, but he insisted and then she screamed. Podar shot her with the pellet gun and Tarasov fled her house. Podar caught her in the yard, stabbed her fatally and repeatedly. Podar then returned to his house and called the police, telling them what he did and to handcuff him. So Podar underwent trial wherein he pleaded guilty to manslaughter. He was tried for first-degree murder, but he was found guilty of second-degree murder and sentenced to 5 years in prison. But his lawyer successfully appealed this second-degree murder and he was deported to India na lang. So next slide, please. So after, Tarasov's parents filed lawsuits against the campus police, the health service, and the regents of the University of California for failing to provide proper warning to Tarasov. So the first trial was dismissed on the grounds that there was no cause for action as the therapist's primary responsibility was to the patient rather than a third party, which is Tarasov daw. In 1974, the Tarasov decision was first handed down. The court ruled that a therapist has a duty to reasonable care to give warning to a person who may be in danger because of their patient's mental state. In 1974, Tarasov decision was represented for the second time. The decision on the first hearing was upheld but modified. The court ruled that when a therapist determines that a patient presents a serious danger of violence to another, the therapist has a duty to protect that other person. So for the next part, bioethical principles involved, let me start the discussion. Next slide, please. Duty to protect. Psychotherapists have a duty to protect potential victims if their patients make threats or behave in a way where they present themselves as a serious danger of violence to another. Thus, Dr. Moore should have warned Tarasov that there may be a threat and imminent danger to her life. So second, confidentiality. Therapists have to advise patients as soon as treatment begins about the limits of confidentiality, so as the patient may properly decide whether to continue the treatment even without the guarantee of full patient confidentiality. With this, the need to protect the public is more important than upholding patient confidentiality.
Okay, so to continue with the bioethical principle, next is the duty to warn. So it is the duty of the healthcare provider to warn possible and identified victims when a patient makes a threat to harm others. Protecting the involved individual may necessitate disclosure of the confidential information to avoid a preventable injury or death. Dr. Moore practiced the principle of beneficence by warning the campus police of the threats made by his patient Podar, and this resulted in Podar's brief detention and search in his apartment. Next is negligence. So Podar was released from police custody without Dr. Moore and or the police officer notifying Tarasov or her parents about Podar's intent to kill her. This is a violation of non-maleficence on their part because warning the concerned party could have prevented Tarasov's death. And lastly, for the last part of the report, contribution of the case to bioethical education. So Tarasov versus Regents of the University of California is the first case in which the Supreme Court held that therapists and mental health care professionals have the duty to protect third parties from threat of bodily harm by a patient. In Jablansky's versus United States in 1983, the court expanded Tarasov's ambiguous definition of foreseeable harm and offered a strict standard for the types of warning that will properly discharge a therapist's duty to protect. So Jablonski's court held that specific threats are not only indicator of foreseeability, but rather that a patient's history of violence towards a specific victim or class of victims may be sufficient. It was also suggested that therapists must meet very strict warning standards in order to properly do their duty to protect. And Tarasov's duty and discharge aims to limit the duty to protect specific victims and limit the liability of therapists once the duty is discharged. In most statutes, the duty to protect arises only after one of the following conditions are met. First, if the patient explicitly threatens a named or otherwise clearly identifiable victim. And second, if the patient makes no explicit threat, but has a history of violence and there is very good reason to believe that the patient will commit serious violence. So the therapist satisfies the duty to protect by warning the potential victim or appropriate authorities or by hospitalizing the patient either on voluntary or involuntary basis. All statutes immunize therapists against suit for breach of confidentiality when the therapist makes a good faith warning. And lastly, there are 3 states, namely California, Colorado, and Washington, which require therapists to warn both the potential victim and the police. So these are our references. Thank you so much for listening and God bless po.
Good.
Okay, so thank you very much. May I ask the 2 doctors? All right, Dr. Name and Dr. Martinez. Okay, so thank you very much for your report. Anyhow, so my question is, what can you say about the decision made by the school authority in releasing Tarasov? Or rather the police?
Doc, on releasing Podar po ba?
Ay, sorry, si Podar. Okay, the victim is Tarasov. Okay, so Podar.
So, na-warn naman po kasi sila ni Dr. Moore na merong episodes na rational si Podar. So, sana they could have taken that warning more seriously kaysa sa nirelease nila ng ganun po.
Okay. So, given that, on your opinion, no, based on your opinion, is it really just the doctor's responsibility not giving warning to the victim's family, or may contribution din the school authority or even the ones who took custody of Podar first, because they were informed by the physician of the tendency of Podar to be violent and the intent to kill, right?
Doc, tingin ko po responsible din sila na hindi nila in-inform yung family kasi since meron na po silang knowledge na may intent to kill, dapat po kinausap nila yung concerned parties like yung family ni Tarasov or si Tarasov mismo para nakapaghanda po siya or para hindi po or para na-prevent po sana yung death niya.
Yeah, so actually the responsibility is not just does not just fell on the doctor, no, on the psychiatrist, because the psychiatrist already informed the school authority or even the ones who actually took custody of Podar, diba? However, no, so in this case nakita natin that the psychiatrist or the doctor, no, was the one who was pinned down, no? So parang siya lang yung may kasalanan. Okay, so let's focus our discussion on that, no? So for doctors who saw patients who have the tendency to harm the others, no? So the duty to protect is not just on the patient, no, doing harm to himself, but also the duty to protect to the what? The intended victim. Okay, so mawawala na yung confidentiality doon. Okay, because the higher good, which is what? The protection of life, no, comes first. Okay, so malinaw yun, ha? That's what the duty to protect, no? So when we are talking about mentally challenged individuals who directly, ito talagang sinabi na niya, di ba? Meron siyang intention to kill Tarasov, no? And who have the tendency to be violent. Hindi yun tinatago. Okay? So even if we have that principle of confidentiality, so may exception, especially if our patients become a danger to the others already. Okay, dapat klaro yun. So yun naman ang importante when we are talking about issues on psychiatry, okay, or mental health issues. Okay, so yun yung ethics, no? So of course, we protect the identity of our patients for as long as we could, no? Especially kasi nga itong cases ng mental health ay super stigmatized pa ang community and even the family, right? So we protect, but then if that duty to protect, okay, will cost, no, a life, then you give it up, no, because you have to protect another life. Okay, the intention is not to be a marites, hindi naman yun, diba? So the intention is actually what? Good. No? Why? Because you are telling, no, you are warning so that the other people, or the public for that matter, can actually have precautionary measures. Okay? So klaro, di ba? Madali lang ang issues on psychiatry. Okay, so depende na lang kung bibigyan kayo ng mga questions na may mga typo errors. Sorry for the last time, ha? Okay, so na ano ba kayo doon sa true or false na yun na may except? Okay, may typo error lang. Okay, so but congratulations by the way. You did well in your exams for your midterms. So hopefully hanggang sa finals. Okay, so anyway, congratulations this batch. Okay, so at least kayo pinakamataas pa rin kayo. Okay, so comparing it to the previous batches that I handled, especially for midterms. Okay, so kasi may marami din akong ni-repeat na questions, diba? Pero bonus nyo na lang yun kasi hindi ako nakapag-lecture for pediatric. Okay, so anyhow, I hope you're learning from your self-readings. Okay, so and for this topic, I want to add this sensitivity that we need, especially now that we have a lot of cases of autism. Okay? So, thank you very much, Dr. Name and Dr. Martinez. Okay, so I'm sure you've most of you siguro have already watched the K-drama It's Okay to Be Not Okay. Diba? So maraming mental issues doon. Okay, so I want you to, kung hindi pa, okay, so I got this clip from YouTube, no? So let's see and let's discuss later. No, we still have 10 minutes. Okay, so this is around 2 minutes of clip.
나 통화 좀 하고 올게. 여기 그대로 있어?
스테고사우루스 이거 지붕동마뱀이라는 뜻이야. 지붕동마뱀이라는 뜻.
이제 와서 오긴 뭘 와.
골판 이게 등쪽을 따라 도단한 골판이 특징이며 주라기 후기에 그때 살았을 것으로 추정합니다. 과학자들 그때 살지 않았으니까
뭐야 당신?
스테고사우루스 엄청 커. 이 커다란 덩치에 비해 내 크기가 작기 때문에 똑같은 인형이 있습니다. 스테고사우루스 똑같은 인형. 제가 지은 이 아이의 이름은 눈물이랑
그렇게 말하니까 못 알아듣지.
Okay, so kailangan ko nang putulin kasi baka mag-K-drama na tayo dito. Alright, so I just want to so add this, no, as a sensitivity because probably some of you have relatives or even siblings who have autism disorder, no, the autism spectrum disorder. So that includes already ADHD, no, so isang spectrum na lang sila, and of course autism itself. No? So, medyo malawak na siya. Okay? So, they're considered also part of this mental issues, diba? So, especially for those who are not functional, who have severe form. So, Sangte, no? So, the brother of Gangte, okay? So, have a severe form of autism. Although, if you've seen the whole series, so routine, no? Routine talaga kasi yung kanyang yung routinary talaga yung kanilang life. So but then if something happened with that routine, so lahat ng nakikita nila parang malaki. So that's why it was depicted there, no? So pag nagkakaroon ng conflict, so para sa kanila sobrang laki na yon, laking issue na. So konting sigaw parang napaka anong sigaw, okay, or even all the things that they see becomes big, no? So that's their world, okay? And we know that they are gifted as well, no? And but how to deal with them, no? So as a doctor, okay, and who are not expert, so although we are doctors, we are not expert in knowing how to deal with them, no, because there are specific therapy or therapeutic sessions for them, no? So but we have to be sensitive, no? So we go with the flow, okay? So kaya yung brother niya, Actually, kahit yung brother niya nahirapan din sometimes, di ba? So, meron silang misunderstanding, etc. No? But it's really go with the flow and then routine. Okay? So, respect their routine, respect their space. So, and how about voluntary confinement, involuntary confinement? Okay? So, when we deal with mentally challenged individuals, so there are always two things here, no? When do we actually force them, quote unquote, that is involuntary commitment or admission, no? So when will we push for that, no? When they already hurt the others. Okay, so si Sangte, hindi siya dangerous actually, no? So bata lang talaga siya. And he has the gift of knowing everything about dinosaurs. Okay, so yun yung kanyang diba? Yung kanyang gift, and of course the drawing, the arts. Okay, so but he cannot be involuntarily confined, no? So except when there was a scene in this series that he was involuntarily confined, nasa isolation room siya, no? Kasi naging violent na siya that time. Okay, and it was with the consent of the brother, who was the who is the decision maker for him. Okay, so but at this point hindi siya threat to the public. Okay, so there's no need, no? So pag voluntary confinement naman or voluntary admission, no, for mentally challenged individuals. So, ibig sabihin, they understand that they need to be confined, and during that time that they are sane, okay, they understand everything that the doctor is telling them. So, they themselves, no, submit for confinement. That's voluntary confinement. Okay? So, yon. Okay? So, how to deal with this type of patient? So, as I've said, I'm going back to the autism spectrum disorder, no? You go with the flow, okay, and then you respect their space, respect their time, respect their routine, okay. So, and if of course the best is actually to convince them to have therapy, okay, and kasi dapat early detection. Ang early diagnosis, ang ADHD, ang autism spectrum disorder, para early intervention. Okay? All right. Okay, questions, clarifications. I hope you learned some things this afternoon, okay, with the two reports and some additional inputs from me. Okay? Wala na? Okay, so let's call it a day. So